Okay, so how do you bring millions of people into the modern digital economy? It's a massive question, right? And it turns out the answer isn't just about, building a bunch of new apps. It's actually about predicting the future. Today, we're going to dive into a really fascinating study that uses AI to figure out who's ready to embrace the future of money and, more importantly, how we can help them get there a whole lot faster.
All right, let's start with just one number, 66%. According to the World Bank, that's how many adults in Latin America and the Caribbean made or got a digital payment back in 2021. Now, you might hear that and think, hey, that sounds pretty good. But like with most things, context is everything.
Because when you put that 66% right next to the 95% of adults in high-income countries who are using digital payments, wow, suddenly you see this huge gap open up. And this isn't just some number on a chart. It represents a real, significant divide in financial access and, opportunity.
And that brings us to what's known as the digital payment gap. Look, this is so much more than just the convenience of tapping your phone to buy a coffee. It's about being plugged into the modern economy. It's about getting access to new services and being able to actually participate in growing markets.
So here's the bottom line. Closing this gap is absolutely essential. It's a massive lever for progress. When more people can use digital finance, it actually strengthens the whole economy. It creates all these new opportunities, and it gives millions of people access to financial tools they've just never had before.
But here's the tricky part. To really close that gap, you can't just throw the same services at everyone and hope it sticks. No, you need to be smarter. You need to figure out who is most likely to make that leap. You've got to predict who's right on the edge of adopting these new financial technologies.
And that leads us right to the big question that a team of researchers from Peru decided to tackle. They got their hands on this huge data set from the World Bank, and they asked a simple but powerful question. Can we actually use AI to predict who's about to start using digital payments?
So to find out, they designed this really cool experiment. They basically set up a competition, a showdown between 4 different AI models, pitting them against each other to see which one could be the best analyst and predict what people would do. Now, this whole research process might sound super complex, but it really just boils down to 3 simple steps. First, you get the data. Second, you train the AI models. And third, you pick the winner. Easy enough, right? Okay, so to make a good prediction, the AI needed to understand, people's actual lives. So the researchers fed it this incredibly rich data set. We're talking over 18,000 people across 19 countries. And it wasn't just about income. It was everything. Age, education, whether they save money, if they had a bank account, even if they owned a mobile phone, the whole picture.
And here are our 4 contenders. We've got Random Forest, LightGBM, XGBoost, and CatBoost. Now, these are all heavy hitters, really powerful machine learning algorithms. Just think of it like a high-stakes bake-off. Each one gets the exact same ingredients, the same data, and they have to try and cook up the most accurate prediction.
So after all that training and testing, it was time to see who came out on top.
So the big question is, which one of these AI analysts actually performed the best? Who was the top predictor? And the winner, by a pretty clear margin, was an algorithm called LightGBM. Now, I know this chart looks a little busy, but the takeaway is super simple. Each group of bars is one of our AI competitors. The higher the bar, the better it did on a particular test. And if you look, the bars for LightGBM are just consistently the highest across the board. It wasn't just accurate, it was the most reliable predictor of the whole group. So how exactly did they pick the best one? Well, they used this really smart metric called the F1 score. And you can think of it like this, it's a balancing act. On one hand, you want the AI to be great at finding the people who will adopt digital payments. That's called recall. But on the other hand, you don't want it to make a bunch of mistakes and flag people who have zero interest. That's called precision. The F1 score finds that perfect sweet spot between the two, and that's exactly where LightGBM just knocked it out of the park. In fact, LightGBM nailed an F1 score of over 90%. I mean, that is incredibly high for this kind of work. But okay, a percentage is still just a number. What does that level of accuracy actually look like in the real world? This little grid here is called a confusion matrix, but it's actually not that confusing. It's basically a simple scorecard for the AI. And here's the most important takeaway. If you look at the bottom right, it tells us that for every 100 people who are actually using digital payments, the model correctly spotted 94 of them. That is just a stunningly low error rate. It really shows you how powerful this thing is.
Okay, so we've got this amazing prediction tool. It's super accurate, but so what? A prediction is only as good as what you do with it, right? And this is where the research gets really, really exciting. When we go from this cool tech experiment to a powerful tool for real-world change.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. The researchers themselves said it best. They wrote that their findings highlight the value of machine learning models in the financial sector. In other words, this isn't just some academic exercise. This is a practical tool that could have a massive impact, especially for financial inclusion.
So what does this actually mean in practice? Well, with this kind of predictive power, governments can design smarter policies. Banks and fintech companies can create better products that people will actually want and use. You can target financial education campaigns right at the people who are ready to listen. The bottom line, you can seriously accelerate financial inclusion.
And really, that's the big takeaway here. This isn't about some crystal ball just for fun. It's about being able to pinpoint exactly who is on the verge of making a change. That means we can offer the right help at the right time and build a more inclusive financial future for everybody. And we can do it a whole lot faster.
So, that leaves us with a pretty powerful thought. We've just seen how AI can predict our financial behavior with incredible accuracy. If we can map out something that complex, what's the next big problem we can point this technology at? Could we start predicting public health crises? Or maybe forecast what educational resources a community will need in 5 years? The door is wide open, and honestly, the possibilities are kind of staggering to think about.